What's up, everybody? Welcome to Take Me Off Your List, supported by Pitchfire, obviously. I've got someone that I've known, I think I've known you for I think I met you first in 2016 or 2017 at like the Leadership Summit or something. But Michael Phelan, founder of Go to Market Pros here. We're going to talk a ton today about effective prospecting, some stuff that's Michael's been learning, working on his Go to Market Pros. We're going to dive into a lot of cool cutting edge stuff that he's been researching and learning about. And I'm really excited about this. Michael, welcome to the show. What's up?
Well, thanks for having me on, Ryan. So we know each other pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID, right?
We've done it. The critics said it couldn't be done.
Yeah.
Prior to recording this, we were just talking about Michael actually grew up in Ireland, which is cool. And he's like, you could actually be a citizen if you have like a grandfather. I actually just did a quick Google search. Apparently you can go back to great grandfather even.
Yes. Yeah.
That's so cool. When did you move to the United States originally?
Boy, I moved to the United States in 1984. It was during the Olympics were on at the time in LA. So I moved over. That was and Reagan was president at that time. So that's the time I moved over. Very different world.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. And you've kind of, we're both New England guys. We've been here for I was born and raised in New England. I lived in Mass originally and moved to New Hampshire when I was in high school. Have you been here generally, like the Boston area, pretty much your whole life? Or
yeah, spent a little bit of time on the West Coast, a little bit of time in Florida, but pretty much 1984 became a Red Sox fan, and went through the suffering of the 1986 fiasco with the Sox. But later on, we got 3 World Championships, so that was good.
I know. I'm glad that happened. I was going through college when that happened, and it was crazy. You've been like. You're like one of the more like analytical and respectful people online. You've got a huge following on LinkedIn. I've seen you do talks before. Tell people what Go to Market Pros is to kind of kick off like what you've been up to and what you're working on with this, like for people that have never heard of this before.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I started my career on, in consumer with companies like Reebok, and then went off into B2B. And about 13 years ago, I just saw that go-to-market was very fractured. Even sales and marketing got very fractured, and companies really didn't have a clear strategy, a way of approaching the market. They didn't understand their customers that well or their prospects that well. So I really thought that this was an area that I could add a lot of value to. So I help companies come into the U.S. market from Europe and Asia. I help companies grow in the U.S. market. And I kind of operate between the intersection of sales and marketing, which I think is one of the more challenging areas. How do you get prospects and customers to interact, to exchange information? How do you deliver that value exchange? And it's changed a lot. A lot of things are changing in the sales process, so companies really need to adjust in 2025.
We were talking before recording this a little bit, but one of the things that like made me kind of start Pitchfire is when I was at Lead IQ from like 2016 to 2021, I just watched reply rates plummet. I watched connect rates on cold calls plummet. The roads that we used to use to prospect on are just over traveled now. People get cold called and cold emailed so much now. What you actually say in that message is really important. And that's one of the things you've been researching a little bit, right, Michael?
Yeah, true. A lot of it is positioning, and companies spend a fortune on positioning. But when you talk to B2B buyers, and if you gave, 10 different positioning headlines or taglines from the top 10 tech companies in the US, buyers couldn't tell which one is which. They couldn't tell the difference. So I think that in the world of marketing, we overstate, messaging, we overstate, the taglines. Really what it is are you adding enough value to the buyer to get them to give you 15 minutes of your time? So my message is it's about a value exchange. It's about what can you do to help them be a better buyer? What insights can you deliver to them that they don't know? So classic sales training says, study the buyer a lot, impress the buyer how much you know about them, and they will meet with you. When you really talk to buyers, and I talk to hundreds of B2B buyers every year, they really couldn't care less what you know about them. They care what you know about how well they're doing the job, how they can do it better. But more importantly, they care about what their best-in-class peers are doing and what their competitors are doing, and if they're underperforming and if there's a gap. So I think we need to kind of change how we engage with buyers and not be all about here's how we position ourselves so you buy us, and change to here's how we help you do your job better. Here's how we help you be a better buyer. And here's how we deliver value and insights to you. And forget about all this kind of tweaking copy and positioning and messaging strategy, and think about if you give the right value to the buyer, it doesn't matter how you write it, it doesn't matter how you tweak it, they'll get it. So I think that's part of it. The other part of it is they're just overwhelmed with the volume. So you have to be very creative. And I think in 2025, creativity will surge as AI explodes content, as channels get really heavily populated. Two things will drive engagement. One is real through authentic value, and the
Yeah.
second thing is creativity. I think those are the two areas that will. It's not your messaging how you say it. It's you have to deliver it in a creative, different way. You have to come from a different point, or you have to visualize it in a different way. AI is not at all creative, so that's really where people will win is driving creativity with AI. But AI is not going to be creative. It's not creative at all in nature.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I have a couple things I wanted to say from what you just mentioned. The first thing I was going to say, reacting to the AI thing, I feel like AI is more like a partner to bounce ideas off of, not something you grab as your direct source. And you can see it on LinkedIn with posts right now, like people writing and commenting with AI bots just saying generic stuff from what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
That's not actually insightful.
Yeah,
So that part
yeah.
of it, you probably see it a lot with all your followers and stuff. The other thing I was going to mention, you talked about one of the pains that all these businesses have is trying to figure out how to make you seem best in class with
Mm-hmm.
the vendors that you work with and stuff. I was thinking about an exercise we did when I was at Lead IQ in 2021. We were actually going through a process of repositioning the company a little bit to position Lead IQ up market. And I was like looking at all these different sales vendors. And one of the things that really drove me nuts is if you looked at every single company in sales tech, almost all of them had some sort of headline on their website that was like, grow your business, or it's our business to grow yours, or like some variation of that. There are literally 40 or 50 different vendors in the sales space that all had almost the same value prop that they're
Right.
peddling out to people. And you're the website, you're the marketer writing that to people, or you're the sales team that's positioned that way. Of course, you're going to say that you create that outcome. Like,
Yeah.
how do you make someone stop and look at you and be the purple cow and be like, oh, what is this? I want to take a picture. I want to like share this. I want to actually look into what this is.
So yeah, there's several, and I cover a lot of these strategies in a workshop that I just launched in 2025. But there are a lot of people claiming they're reinventing the industry. That's one of my favorite. And claiming best practices and actually showing best practices is really where it differs. So I had an interesting conversation with the head of the guy that bought all the marketing technology for Target. Hundreds of millions of dollars he bought. And I said to him, "How many people approach you every week?" And he said, "Yeah, maybe 120, 150." And I said, "How many people do you meet every month?" He said, "Maybe one or two." I said, "Wow, how do you narrow it down to that?" And he said, "It's very simple." He goes, "There's a couple of things that we really care about at Target. One is advanced marketing personalization. We know that moves the needle. When we walk into our board meeting, they say to us, why aren't you ranked number one in advanced marketing personalization? And the one that is ranked number one is Sephora. And you better have an answer to why we're number 14 and Sephora's number one. And those are the facts. And anybody that approaches us that can show us insight into that. So for example, I just talked to Sephora. I learned some things they're doing. I took a look at your site. Here's the comparison. These are some things that would actually make a big difference. So actually doing the work on showing them what their performance is. Another example I did is we were going after AT&T and Verizon, and the company I was working with had a much better product, a much better system. But AT&T were really kind of had invested in another company, and they were really set in their ways. So what we did is we took 10 SMBs, we drove them through the Verizon process. We compared it to the AT&T process. We did a side-by-side video comparison, and we showed AT&T that when their customers experienced their platform, it was really, they were using a lousy product. And it took them a while to come to the conclusion that and they got mad initially, but they did meet with us and they did look at the new platform, and it did have a big impact on how they thought about things. So sometimes you have to do the work to show the customer that what they're using is not that good. So interview their customers, have their customers go through their platform, compare it to their competitors, or interview their employees. Like if you're going after a CIO and they'll
Yeah.
say, hey, how's your work management software? And the CIO is going, great, everybody loves it. Oh, let me show you a study that we did with 10 of your employees who said it was the worst system going. Now, initially, the CIO might be a bit mad at that, but he's going to look at that, or she's going to look at that and go, wow, you guys have done some work here. Maybe it's not that good. Maybe I haven't tuned in. How can you help us? So you want the buyer to ask you, how can you help us bridge a performance gap? You nearly want them to nearly consult you to bring you into the process around making the job better. And it's not about solving for pain. I think marketers too often are all about pain. We have 100 pains every day, but we only solve 2 or 3 of them. So you have to find something that's high value, strategic, important to the organization, and you have to frame it in a way that you're really helping them do a better job. So I think showing real comparisons, audits is one way of doing it. Before and after audits, benchmarks, comparison. Show them how they could get better, and show them what they're doing wrong now, and show them how much better it could be if they did something right. So that's the difference between somebody talking about best practices and somebody actually demonstrating it and showing it.
You know, what's funny, you're two things are coming from my head, like hearing this actually. The first thing I was thinking about is like, this is part of the reason that I like wanted to build Pitchfire is like, you might go do all this work and try and get in front of the person that you're trying to get in front of. And they might not ever look at your email, or your email might not get delivered, or they might not answer your call. What like I'm trying to do is kind of like build a place where like, you know, when you do all this work, you'll actually hear back from that person because of it. Like that's sort of part of why I was building up the dynamics of this. What you're talking about is really smart because like a lot of people are like, oh, what's the future of pitching? And I'm like, well, it's being creative. It's putting the effort toward like, it's almost like you're making a Super Bowl ad for one client at a time. Like for them, what you're talking about is something where like a rep knows business. They know their customers. They know what's trending and what's going on in that industry that they're selling into. A lot of the time, you don't even need to be creative and do something really like, because you'd never make a Super Bowl ad doing an A/B test of like, this is what your customers are seeing, it's what your customers aren't seeing. Like, you wouldn't do that in a Super Bowl ad. What you're talking about is actually the next level of evolution of selling, where like you're getting in and like literally doing a before and after like diet photo, except showing like this is what it looks like status quo versus this is what best in class looks like. I love that concept. It's going to make me think after this podcast recording, like, oh man, like what actually, like, where are we heading with like how people think about this? And then I was thinking about a successful prospecting campaign we did when I was at Dine in 2012. We did this thing, we called it Speed Awareness Month. And we went and our CTO on a hackathon day, like our engineering team, everyone had an off-road map day where you could like go build something that wasn't related to the business. This guy, Alex Sergey, built a way for all of our managed DNS servers to ping these domains and do speed test for clients that we were prospecting. So I gave him a prospect list of like all these accounts, and he did a speed test of what they're currently using versus what we were using. And it was super successful. Like what I did is I actually, instead of emailing everybody and being like, hey, this was your speed test results, what I did is I ranked all of them and then told people where they ranked for the top 5,000 e-commerce brands. And I said, if you want to see your report, reply back. And we had like, it was such a successful campaign because like we dangled this thing in front of them, but we put the work in.
Yeah, everybody wants to know where they stand and how they rate. So there's a lot of ways of doing it. SailTrue is a company that actually rated the top 100 retailers on advanced marketing personalization. And they did it so well, they became the analyst for their industry. So one of the things I talk to is, can you become the analyst for your industry? And Recorded Future, you probably know in Boston, they became the kind of analyst for their industry by aggregating all of the content on a very niche space for their audience. And what happened with Sail Through is when they did the ranking, they got called in by the CMOs, who was their customer, but over
Yep.
time they got called in by the C-suite, and these ranking became part of their 10K on how they did versus competitors. And so when you get called in and you say, well, you're the authority in terms of the ranking. Another one was HubSpot and WebGrader, very similar concept. They
Yeah.
graded your
Let's hear
website,
that.
right?
Yeah.
And that was brilliant. And so people, you're giving them a scorecard. You're giving them a score from 1 to 10, from 1 to 100. And when people see a low score and they say, well, where is our competitor? And you say, actually, your competitor is 20 points ahead of you. They're very motivated to act. The other thing is there's a very high, you know, deals going silent piece, and there's a very high at the end of the process now with just deals going south. One of the things that I realized, if you're actually selling based on bridging performance gap to best in class, it tends not to die as it goes up through the food chain. Because when it goes up to the executive and the board meeting, back to our Target example, why are we investing with this company? Well, we're number 14, they're number 1. This company has identified why, and they're experts in bridging that gap. That deal is very unlikely to be killed as it goes up through the funnel versus something that's, oh, it's 5% less, or it's 10% less, or it operates just a little bit better, or it's got this extra features. Sometimes, especially now, that kind of stuff has seemed like a nice to have. But bridging performance gaps, the other one that's huge is what I call leaving money on the table. If you can convince the especially finance people and senior sales and marketing folks that they're actually leaving money on the table or wasting money, so their current process is consuming too much energy, too much resources, too much IT, too much support, and is really just leaving money on the table. So show them that if they had the right product, they can gain share. If they had the right product, they can take customers back from their competitors. They can win more deals. That kind of stuff is much more effective than our product is slightly better than the one you have. So why don't you switch over? So you can get the mid-level managers to go with that, but then it comes up through the ranks and go, yes, I can see how it makes the job a little bit easier. I can see the dashboard's a bit better. I can see it's a little bit less money, but we want to go after huge savings, right? So 5
Yep.
or 10 or 15% is not enough. We have to be like 30, 50%, right, nowadays to get someone to make a change.
All right, Michael, I know this might not fit your target market because you work with some big companies, right? Like you probably have a lot of really big companies you work with, right?
It's actually surprising. I work with startups, early stage, mid stage, and enterprise because what I do kind of appeals to all. So
Yeah.
it's funny how I worked up and down the food chain in terms of size.
Okay, maybe this is good then actually because you could help me out. I've tricked you into a podcast and now you have to help me for free.
Okay, sure.
What do you do? What do you do if you're someone listening to this and you're like, how do I find out? All right, so the first question is, how do I find out what best in class companies are doing? And if they're not using me, does that matter?
Yeah, so I'm surprised how little people know about what best in class is. So, for example,
Yep.
discovery meetings are down 30% at SaaS companies, right? Devastating. Marketers and salespeople should be saying, well, what companies are they up 20% at? And what are those companies doing? So I've done the work to find those programs and package it up. So I can bring a company through 30 different programs. They can pick and choose what works and we can implement them. Or they can do it themselves too. They could do it themselves. But I'm surprised when I talk to brand managers, product managers, and I say, what are your competitors doing? They have no idea. And they're nearly afraid to investigate what their competitors are doing. So the advantage of you working with somebody on the outside,
Yeah.
like one of the things I do sometimes is I interview 10 people that recently left a company and find out what drove their sales and marketing. But very few brand managers would actually do that. Very few people inside a corporation would do that. So it's out there. It can be found. You have to be willing to take risk to get it, or you have to be willing to hire somebody that really can do that and knows that. What I found right now is people are looking inward too much and they need to be looking outward more. They're like, well, let's get rid of all the consultants. Let's bring everything in-house. Let's get rid of agencies. But, looking inward on a problem like discovery meetings down 30%, or SQL, MQL conversion to meetings down 50%. They don't have a solution to that. So recognize the fact that you have to go outside. Recognize the fact that it's worth going outside. And unless you're going to spend 2 years studying that issue and interviewing all those companies, work with people that have that knowledge. So I think a kind of an outside view is very important, and you have to be willing to take risks to get best practices. They're not always published. They're not easily available, but they're there. You have to try really different ways of doing it. And so if you want to stay on the safe side of corporate security and you don't want to get a smack from someone in legal, work with someone that's much more entrepreneurial, that doesn't have those restrictions. It's not that you're doing anything illegal with the outside person, but the outside person is just fast acting, so much more entrepreneurial, can get that information better for you. So either do it yourself or find that resource, but there's no excuse for not knowing.
Yeah. So, okay. So you're saying the other advantage of using someone like you, obviously, is that you probably see some patterns that you had from other clients you've worked with. So like,
yes,
you get on a call with them like, oh, this is actually actually, what's funny? The genius part about what you talked about with interviewing people that left is that, like, if you go to any CEO at these big companies and say, what are your top 3 goals that aren't related to OKRs? It's usually keeping money in the bank account, continue to grow the business, and hiring and retaining talent.
right.
So some of the things that you might get that are signals from people that left, at a minimum, will fit in one of those buckets. Like, hey, I talked to some of the people that left your company. That actually could be useful information that you could tell, like, you could go to the C-suite and be like, hey, we collected some information on people that had left and found that this was a problem that they were seeing over and over again. Even if it's not on their terms, that's still useful.
Yeah, if you were selling to, let's say, someone that's responsible for retention, or someone in HR, or maybe a sales leader that had lost a lot of people, and you're able to come back and say, I've talked to 50 of people that have left, and here are 3 or 4 issues that you really need to address, and here's how to address them. And by the way, your competitors are doing a better job on you than that, because we've also talked to their people. Would you be interested in having a conversation how you can bridge that performance gap and increase your retention? I don't know any sales leader or HR leader that wouldn't take that. And where I learned this was interesting. When I look at the top 1% of reps, this strategy of understanding a prospect's competitor, they leverage all the time. And when you look at advertising agencies, if they're doing business with somebody in a sector, they're very good at like interviewing everybody else. Hey, did you know that Google is our client? Did you know that, whoever it is? And then they identify all the other people that are around that little area, and they're able to fully leverage it. But the beauty of this methodology is you don't even have to sell to those people. They don't even have to be your customers if you interview them and aggregate the best practices. So if somebody says, hey, I had a great conversation with General Electric about airlines, and I know you're in the airline manufacturing business, I'd love to talk to you about some of the things I learned on that call. Now, keep in mind, I've never mentioned that they're a customer. And in fact, it's better that they're not a customer, because I'm not sharing anything confidential. I did a research. I pay them for the information. It's all above board. And they would be delighted to meet with me. So the top reps leverage this methodology all the time. And I say, if you're going to spend 10 hours focusing on the customer, spend 9 hours focusing on the customer's competitors and 1 hour focusing on them, because that's really what they care about.
Oh man, I feel like you're making a light bulb go off in my head a little bit. The other problem is you can look at public information from the best in class companies. Like,
yes,
you can go. Sephora is publishing the priorities in their reports that they're putting out for their stockholders. Like,
right.
I assume they're publicly traded. I think they are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you can go get this information out there about these people. And then if you want to get even more information, go directly reach out to people that are working there. If they don't want to give you anything, like, okay, that's all right. But some people are okay doing this, especially if you can give them information back afterward.
Yeah, you give them a stipend. You do a genuine research report, and you can even say to them, "Hey, don't disclose anything that's highly confidential." I mean, if you want, you can say that right on the. But people just start talking about what's going on, and so, what did you like about the company? What did you not like? What did they do well? What did they not do well? When you have those kinds of conversations, it can be very powerful. I will say that AI is probably going to do a better job of being able to gather up the public information information.
Yep.
So you could ask ChatGPT, tell me about the top strategic priorities for marketing for Sephora, and it may be able to go through 10Ks and other stuff to get that. So I
Yep.
think that purchasing officers are getting more sophisticated in the use of AI. And it's funny, when I talk to a lot of CMOs, they're all very focused on AI, and they should be. But when I ask them about, well, what are your buyers doing on AI? They have no idea. So what their buyers actually are doing on AI is they're scanning, like the top 1,000 companies in the United States are scanning all the contracts in from companies like ZoomInfo. And they're comparing and contrasting, where am I in terms of pricing? Where am I in terms of features? And they're
Yep.
going back to the companies like ZoomInfo and saying, hey, I'm paying more than other companies, and you're giving away all these features. Every time a company does that, the company immediately matches the pricing and immediately matches the features. So at one point, buyers are in the dark, and now AI is bringing them into the light. So much so that some legal people are trying to put clauses into contracts now to say you can't scan this into one of these bots. That if you do, you'll be in violation and we'll sue you for $100 million because they're so afraid of it. So I think as we think about AI, we have to think about what can it help with marketing and sales, but where's the buyer going to go with AI? And we can't be blindsided and not know anything about what buyers are doing with AI. And I would argue that most CMOs and CROs really don't understand what buyers are doing. We have to balance it on both sides.
Michael, do you talk to, I know you talk to a wide variety of different types of people that have been at these organizations. Do you ever talk to procurement?
I've been on a lot of buying teams because when I work with my clients, when I was at Iron Mountain, we were helping them go down market into mid market and SMB. And one
Yep.
of the things that we needed to do is we needed to bring in e-commerce. So I'd be on a buying team. So the strategy would be we need to make it much simpler for the SMB to buy, and we bring in e-commerce. So in those cases, I'd be part of a team kind of leading that, and we'd be bringing in solutions. So sometimes I will source products for my clients. I'll be part of buying teams for my clients, but I interview literally hundreds of buyers every year too, and I'm
Yep.
listening to them about what their needs are and what they think about the current vendors. We're always asking them about, what do you like about the current vendor, what do you not like? So I'm getting a lot of feedback through those mechanisms, through what I call the moderated prospect meetings that I do with my clients. So I'm hearing a lot of that too. And I also I'll jump in and mention on AI, I'll kind of jump in on some purchasing forums where I'm listening to purchasers and their
Yep.
use of AI, and I'll follow some of that too. So I try and kind of spend a good bit of time over on the buyer side so I can
Yep.
help the sellers be more effective.
So it seems like from what I've been seeing and reading about, the changes that a business is going through is so different every week now versus what it was a couple of years ago. And maybe part of that's part of the market shift and some stuff happening with the economy and the rise of AI and people doing research on their own. And obviously SaaS companies hugging product-led growth as a strategy, like getting people to self-sign up and fill out. It kind of feels like procurement's lost a lot of power on purchase teams versus like now they're just approving stuff and then communicating it with the different departments at these big companies versus what it like a couple years ago it used to be like no, they're the final person, they're the final boss to get sign off on.
Yeah, no, it's a good thing. It's a good point. In fact, the buying teams, as you go up through mid-market and into enterprise, they're increasing in size, right? So, it used to be like there was the recommender and purchasers were the final and legal. But now
Yep.
what you're seeing is the buying teams going from 4 to 6 to 8, which is a real challenge for companies selling. First off, the BDOs are not trained or sophisticated enough to manage a buying team of 8.
Yep.
And they don't know how to sell to CFOs. They don't know how to sell to CIOs. They may know a little bit on purchasing. So I would say purchasing is at the table, but they're now sharing a role of decision making with 5 or 7 or 8 people. So you're probably right in that their absolute authority has decreased, but they're still at the table. I would say that the change that's happened is, more people are coming to the table with a more senior level perspective. So you
Yep.
have to be able to kind of manage through that. In some cases, these decisions are going to the board, and people are like, everything now or you have to arm the C-suite to get and the size of the deal. So it's a very different thing. So identifying all the different members of the buying team,
Mhm.
understanding them, it's a very different type of selling. So I would say you're right. Probably purchasing. In the IT world, a lot of stuff is moving into the business units. It used to be where it was part of IT, but now it's moving into the business units. And IT is more of a security check, which is very important, and that can kibosh your deal. Or it can be, does this fit in? Can we manage this type of thing? So they still playing a role,
Yep.
but I think the business unit's role is increasing relative to their role.
Well, this has been really great, Michael. I definitely have to have you come back and talk more about all the you're like opening my mind to some things I haven't thought about before with selling to larger teams and what they're going through. What do you want to plug? What do you want people to do if they're hearing this and they like what they hear, or they're like, I want to do this? What's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, so my website is Go To Market Pros, and my email is Michael at Go To Market Pros. It's just GOTO Market MARKETROS.com. And I would say the best thing is, let me come in and bring you through the 30 best practices, their programs actually. Let's have your sales and marketing and GTM team pick and choose the ones that really work well for you, and let's activate them. Let's kind of bring that outside thinking in. You choose the ones that are best for you, and I'll help you activate them. You can either activate them yourself, or I can help you activate them. But at least get yourself the box of chocolates to choose from, and rather than being stuck on maybe what's worked in the past and so forth. But like, open up your mind, try things new, be more creative, and there is good solutions out there. Don't get frustrated. There is ways of doing this and better ways of doing this, and I'm happy to work with any company to bring those programs to light.
To bring it full circle, if you want to be part
Yes,
of the 20% that are getting discovery up instead of
exactly,
the 30%
exactly.
down, you
Well,
have to
thank you
know
so
where
much,
to
Ryan, for having me
go.
on. I really appreciate it. This is a great conversation. I know you've been doing this for quite some time, so it's
It's
always
fun.
cool when people who've been in the industry for a few years can have a chat about kind of what's new and different and impactful.
Yeah, I can't wait to clip this one too. There's a lot of great things that you said in here that I'm like, oh, I wish I was writing this down. Everyone else that's listening, thank you. Go check out Michael. On my end, I just want to let people know that we are running some paid prospecting campaigns for, I don't know, probably 20 or 30 companies right now. So if you hear this and you're like, oh man, I want to do that. I want to have an extra channel to build some pipe. Shoot me a DM or email me, Ryan at pitchfire.com, and I will get you set up so you can go do this stuff. It's been really fun and cool the past 2 months. I'm learning a ton with like cutting edge stuff with prospecting. So, Michael, thank you so much for being on. I appreciate you. Pitchfire!